On Oscar night in April of 1961, Jimmy Stewart walked to the podium to accept an honorary award for his best friend, who was too sick to attend. Halfway through, his voice cracked. He looked into the camera and said, "We're all very proud of you, Coop." The audience went quiet. Nobody had been told Gary Cooper was dying. By the next morning, the whole world knew. What happened inside that house in the weeks that followed stayed private for almost 40 years, until his only child decided to tell it. If you grew up going to the pictures, Gary Cooper needs no introduction. Sergeant York, the pride of the Yankees, High Noon. For 35 years he was the tall, quiet American, the man who said yup and meant more by it than most actors managed with a full page of dialogue. 2 Academy Awards for Best Actor. More than 100 films. For a whole generation of moviegoers, that face was what decency looked like. He came from Helena, Montana, born Frank James Cooper in 1901, the son of an English-born state Supreme Court judge. He grew up riding on the family ranch, and a car accident as a teenager left him with a hip injury that shaped the loose, easy way he moved on screen for the rest of his life. He drifted to Los Angeles in the 20s, hoping to be a cartoonist of all things, and took work as a stunt rider falling off horses for $5 a day. Casting men noticed the tall kid who could ride. An agent renamed him Gary after her hometown in Indiana. Within a few years, he was one of the biggest stars on the Paramount lot, and by 1939, the highest paid. His daughter Maria was born in 1937, his only child with his wife Rocky. And it is Maria who gave us the real picture of the man, in a book she published in 1999 called Gary Cooper Off Camera, and in decades of interviews since, well into her 80s. The man she describes surprised people who only knew the cowboy. Her father painted. He collected modern art before most of Hollywood knew what it was, and counted Picasso among the artists he admired and met. He was close friends with Ernest Hemingway, and the two of them would disappear into the mountains around Sun Valley to hunt and talk for weeks. The quiet on screen was real, she said. He listened more than he spoke, at home just like in the pictures. The road had its valleys. By the late 40s, the parts had gone thin, and a lot of people in town quietly wrote him off. There was a painful separation from Rocky in the early 50s that the fan magazines fed on. Then, in 1952, came High Noon, a small black-and-white Western shot in under a month, with Cooper past 50 and suffering from a bleeding ulcer through the whole shoot. The marshal walking that empty street alone won him his second Oscar and put him back on top. And the marriage healed too. He and Rocky reconciled and stayed together for the rest of his life, and in 1959, following his wife and daughter, he was baptized a Catholic. Maria said the faith of his last years was not a gesture. It was study and conviction, and it mattered enormously to what came next. If you remember watching him, take a moment and subscribe. We tell one star's real story every week, told straight, the way their families told it. In the spring of 1960, doctors found cancer. Surgeries followed, first for his prostate, then more when it spread to his colon. Through all of it, he kept working, finishing his last picture, The Naked Edge, in London. By the end of the year, the disease had reached his lungs and his bones, and the doctors told Rocky and Maria there was nothing more to do. Then the family made a decision that still stands out all these years later. They told him the truth, and Maria says he received it with a calm that steadied everyone around him. His own words, reported at the time, "We'll pray for a miracle, but if not, and God's will be done." That is the man Jimmy Stewart could not talk about without breaking after that Oscar night telegram from around the world poured into the house in Holmby Hills, including one from the Pope and one from Queen Elizabeth. Hemingway, himself gravely ill in Idaho, called his old friend. Maria described the last weeks simply. Home, not a hospital. Her mother rarely leaving his side. Friends stopping in to say goodbye to a man who was, by every account, more worried about how they were taking it than about himself. He died on May 13th, 1961, 6 days after his 60th birthday, with Rocky and Maria in the house. Hemingway followed him 7 weeks later, and people who knew them both said the two deaths belonged to the same chapter of an American story closing. Maria Cooper Janis is in her late 80s now, married for over 50 years to the concert pianist Byron Janis. She has spent a good part of her life tending her father's memory, not by polishing the legend, but by telling the truth of it. and her point has never changed. The decency was not an act. The studios manufactured plenty of images in those years, she says, but with her father, what the camera found was simply what was there. Frank Cooper from Helena, Montana became the face America wanted to believe was its own, and according to the person who knew him best, the belief was justified. The pictures are still there, and the marshal still walks that street at noon, alone, because it is the right thing to do. Next time, another star you grew up with, and the story the cameras never showed.